A few years ago, Musk decided to buy Twitter. And in order to raise money to buy this social network, he took out a loan secured by his own shares. So let's briefly talk about this financing scheme. In fact, there are several types of loans using shares, and the most common way to get such a loan is to borrow shares for short sale. Well, in order to open a short position on shares, you first need to borrow these shares from a broker or other investor, and only then can you sell these shares with the expectation of a further decrease in price. Of course, regardless of where the price goes, these shares will then have to be bought back and returned to the owner. At the same time, there are also other types of loans. Since the share itself is a financial asset, this asset can be used as collateral. Of course, not all shares can be accepted by creditors as collateral. However, if these are shares of a well-known company that can be bought and sold quite easily on the open market, then lenders may consider this type of collateral and agree on the loan itself. Well, here the question may arise. Isn't it easier to sell these shares and then buy them back? In fact, it's not that simple. If we are talking about a small amount, then it is really easier and simpler to sell and then buy them back. However, if we are talking about a large amount of shares, like the same Musk, then in this situation, everything is a little more complicated. First, these are taxes. The seller of shares will thus record a profit and will be forced to pay capital gains tax. Secondly, having got rid of a large block of shares, it can then be very difficult to restore these positions. And thirdly, selling a large amount of shares can lead to a collapse in the share price, as a result of which the seller will receive a smaller amount of money in hand. And if he later wants to buy back these shares, this can lead to an increase in the price. Therefore, in this situation, it is better to pledge these shares at a low interest rate. The only drawback of such lending is that due to the high volatility of the price, the share is a risky type of collateral. Therefore, most likely, the collateral ratio will be lower than for the same mortgage. Personally, I assume that this ratio will be up to 50% of the price agreed between the parties for a certain period. Conventionally, the average price of Tesla in 2022 was at $250, and the bank agreed to a loan of $125 as collateral for these shares. I will say right away that this is a very simplified explanation. I do not know what agreement Musk had with the banks, but I think the logic was exactly this. And now, when the share price has fallen, the collateral size is approaching a critical level, after overcoming which the bank can either require additional shares to be deposited in order to restore an acceptable level of collateral, or repay part of the loan, and Musk can only do this by selling shares. Selling shares is not an option, because it can lead to a further decrease in price, and so Musk will drive himself into a trap. And if he contributes additional shares as collateral, then this is also a temporary solution, because with a further fall in price, the bank's requirements for collateral will increase. In general, Musk now finds himself in a situation similar to that of real estate owners during the 2008 crisis. Moreover, if earlier, due to his authority and outrageous behavior, Musk made a huge contribution to the popularization of Tesla, which provoked a rapid growth in shares. Now his provocative behavior is already playing against him and his company, because very many people do not like Musk's behavior and antics in the White House. And since these same people are consumers, they will also boycott his company's cars. For example, such large protests have erupted in the state of California, which, by the way, mostly votes for Democrats, and which, by coincidence, provides almost 50% of electric car sales in the US. Just recently, such a protest was held in Los Angeles. And considering that last year Tesla sales in California fell by 12%, although the market itself was growing, this year the drop in sales may be even greater. The situation is even worse in Europe. In the first months of 2025, Tesla sales there fell by 50%, and in Germany, which is the largest electric car market on the continent, by as much as 60%. And according to the latest polls, 94% of Germans said that they would not buy a Tesla. And considering the existing technical problems with its cars, such as the recall of almost 50,000 Cybertrucks, this could create quite serious problems for the future of the company. Although, in reality, Musk created these problems for himself.